The map was a lie. Thorn Blackridge knew this the moment his eyes traced the fresh ink marks along the southern border of Silverwood territory. 10 years of war had taught him to read deception the way other men read prayer books. The parchment spread across the obsidian table told a story of fortifications that should not exist, supply routes that made no tactical sense, and defensive positions that screamed of a commander buying time. He leaned forward, the leather of his war harness creaking in the pre-dawn silence of the command chamber. Candlelight carved shadows across the topographical features rendered in meticulous detail by his scouts. Every tree line, every river crossing, every choke point that had claimed the lives of his warriors over a decade of bitter conflict. The intelligence was 3 days old. In war, that made it ancient history. Magnus entered without knocking, a privilege earned through 20 years of shared blood and brotherhood. The old warrior's boots were still caked with mud from the mountain passes, his gray beard frosted with the cold of a night ride. He carried the scent of pine smoke and exhaustion. "The tribute arrives at dawn," Magnus said, his voice the texture of grinding stone. "Garrick's envoy is already in the outer bailey. They brought the girl in a covered wagon, chained from what the gatewatch reports." Thorn did not look up from the map. His finger traced a line along what the intelligence claimed was a new watchtower network. An Omega, unchained, dressed in ceremonial white, Garrick offers peace in exchange for a single life. It was not a question. Magnus knew the terms as well as he did. The old warrior moved to the table, his experienced eyes scanning the terrain that had consumed too many of their young. "You think it is a delaying tactic? I know it is." Thorn's hand moved to a different section of the map, where the border met the territories of the southern clans. "He needs time. The question is time for what? Reinforcements from the south? A flanking maneuver we have not detected? Or something worse?" The silence between them held the weight of too many funerals, too many women made widows, too many children who would never know their fathers' faces. The mountain packs had bled for this stalemate, and Garrick of Silverwood knew exactly how much Thorn's people hungered for an end to the killing. An Omega tribute, the old way, a life offered in supplication to appease the wrath of a conquering Alpha. It should have been an insult, a token so worthless it bordered on mockery. But Garrick was not a fool, which meant the girl was either bait or sacrifice, and neither option sat well in Thorn's gut. "You are going to see her yourself." Magnus made it a statement, not a question. He knew his king too well. "If Garrick considers her worthless enough to send to her death, I want to see what his definition of worthless looks like. And I want to see the men who brought her. Their faces will tell me more than any map." Magnus nodded slowly. He had been there the night Thorn killed his father, had helped drag the old king's body from the great hall, while Thorn stood frozen in the aftermath, his hands still wet with blood, his wolf howling a grief so profound it had shattered something fundamental in the bond between man and beast. 10 years since that night. 10 years since Thorn's wolf had spoken anything but rage. The curse, the shamans called it. The price of patricide, even when that patricide had been mercy itself. Thorn knew better. It was not a curse. It was control. The only way to ensure he never lost himself to the berserker fury that had consumed his father. His wolf's silence was a cage he had built himself, and he had learned to live within its bars. "Prepare a detail," Thorn said, rolling up the map with hands that had held too many weapons and signed too many death warrants. "I want eyes on that wagon before it reaches the inner keep. And Magnus, put scouts on the southern approach. If Garrick is playing for time, I want to know what is coming." The old warrior clasped his fist to his chest, the salute sharp and precise despite his exhaustion. "It will be done." When the door closed, Thorn allowed himself a moment of stillness. The command chamber was built into the heart of the mountain itself, carved from black volcanic rock that held the cold like a clenched fist. No tapestries softened these walls. No comforts disguised the purpose of this space. It was a war room, and war did not forgive softness. He moved to the narrow window that looked east toward the coming dawn. Somewhere in the outer bailey, a girl waited to die. Garrick's throwaway piece, the Omega too flawed to be worth keeping. Thorn had learned long ago that the pieces others discarded often held the most dangerous potential. 3 days earlier and 60 miles south, Sarah Nightbrook stood in the shadows of Silverwood's council hall and listened to men debate the value of her life. "The girl is useless to us." Garrick's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that came from years of crushing dissent beneath an iron fist. Her wolf has not spoken since her first shift, barren stock, a genetic dead end. But to the Mountain King, she is an omega, untouched. The old laws say he must accept or insult the gesture. Sarah pressed herself flatter against the cold stone, her breathing controlled and silent. Years of being invisible had taught her how to become part of the architecture, how to be so still that eyes slid past her like water around a stone. Her wolf's silence was not a flaw. It was a choice. When she was 13 and watched her parents die in what Garrick called a training accident, when she knew in her bones it was murder, her wolf had retreated deep inside, not broken, protecting, waiting for a time when speaking would not mean death. She had learned to live with that silence, had learned that being underestimated was its own kind of weapon. And if he accepts? That was Elder Rowan, his voice thin with age and cunning. We lose nothing and gain a season to fortify. The Southern clans are 3 weeks from full alliance. We need time. He will kill her. Garrick's tone suggested this was not a concern, but a foregone conclusion. The Black Mountain King does not take prisoners. He takes heads. The girl's death will satisfy the old laws and buy us the time we need. A worthless life spent wisely. The council murmured agreement. Sarah felt nothing at the words. She had stopped expecting value in their eyes years ago, when her father had been advocating for peace and her mother had been gathering support among the she-wolves. 2 days later, they were dead, crushed beneath a collapsed training structure that every warrior in the pack swore had been sound the morning before. Sarah had learned to be silent then, had learned to watch and listen and remember, had learned that the weak did not get justice. They got overlooked, and in being overlooked, they got access. For 6 years she had been the quiet omega in the corner. The one they forgot was in the room when they discussed strategy. The one who cleaned the council chambers and saw the maps left carelessly unrolled. The one who brought food to the warriors and heard them boast about patrol routes and supply caches. She knew things, dangerous things, things that could tip the balance of a war. And now Garrick wanted to send her north to die. Sarah slipped from the shadows and made her way through the servant corridors to her small room. It was barely larger than a cell, but it had a window that looked toward the mountains, toward the enemy, toward the monster king who had supposedly torn out his own father's throat in a fit of madness. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed and began to plan. If they were going to throw her away, she would make sure she landed somewhere useful. The covered wagon rolled through the gates of Black Ridge Keep as the first light of dawn touched the mountain peaks. Thorne watched from the shadows of the inner wall, his presence unknown to the nervous envoy and the 6 guards who flanked the wagon like men expecting an ambush. He could smell their fear from 30 feet away. They expected to die here, expected the savage Mountain King to tear them apart the moment they delivered their offering. Their hands stayed close to their weapons, their eyes tracked every shadow, and their wolves prowled just beneath the surface of their skin. Good, let them be afraid. Fear made men honest. The wagon stopped in the center of the courtyard. One of the guards dismounted and approached the rear gate, his movements stiff with tension. When he unlocked the chains and pulled back the canvas cover, Thorne felt his vision sharpen with predatory focus. She was small, smaller than he had expected. The white linen dress they had put her in was thin enough to be useless against the mountain cold, and it hung on her frame like a burial shroud. Iron manacles circled her wrists, the chain between them short enough to restrict movement, but long enough to allow her to walk. But it was her face that held his attention. She was not looking down in submission. Her eyes moved with systematic precision, cataloging every guard position, every exit, every weapon within reach. When her gaze swept past his hiding place, he had the distinct impression of being measured and assessed. This was not the face of a broken victim. This was the face of a woman running calculations. The envoy stepped forward, his voice pitched to carry. The Alpha of Silverwood sends tribute to the King of Black Ridge, an Omega, pure and unclaimed, in hope of peace between our peoples. Thorne remained in the shadows, watching. The girl's attention had shifted to the envoy, and something flickered across her expression. Not fear, something colder, something that looked remarkably like contempt. Magnus appeared at Thorne's elbow, silent as falling snow despite his size. She volunteered. Thorne's head turned slightly. You are certain? Our source in their camp confirmed it. She went to Garrick herself, offered herself as the tribute. Magnus's voice held a note of puzzlement. Why would an Omega volunteer for execution? It was the right question. Thorn studied the girl as the envoy droned through the formal words of offering. She stood perfectly still, but it was not the stillness of resignation. It was the stillness of a scout in enemy territory, every sense alert, every muscle ready. "Because she has a reason to be here," Thorn said quietly, "and I'm going to find out what it is." He stepped from the shadows. The reaction was immediate. The Silverwood guards tensed, hands flying to weapons. The envoy stumbled back a step, but the girl did not flinch. Her eyes tracked his approach with the same systematic assessment she had given the courtyard. She was looking at his weapons first, the long knife at his hip, the war axe strapped across his back, the leather armor that bore the scars of a decade of combat. Only after cataloging his arsenal did her gaze rise to his face. Thorn was accustomed to fear in the eyes of his enemies. He had earned that fear with blood and fire. But what he saw in this girl's expression was not fear. It was evaluation. She was deciding if he was a threat worth running from or a resource worth exploiting. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that his presence would be overwhelming, close enough that his scent would trigger the instinctive recognition if there was any to be had. The morning air was cold enough that their breath misted between them. And then he smelled it. Beneath the fierce sweat of her guards, beneath the road dust and the iron tang of the manacles, there was something that made his wolf stir for the first time in 10 years with something other than rage. It was not magic. It was chemistry. The scent of genetic compatibility so perfect that his body recognized it on a level deeper than conscious thought. His wolf, silent and caged for a decade, lifted its head and tested the air with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Mate. The word echoed in the hollow spaces where his wolf's voice had been. Not a command, not destiny, just a biological fact as irrefutable as gravity. And from the way her pupils dilated, the way her pulse jumped visible in the hollow of her throat, she felt it too. For a long moment, they stood frozen in mutual recognition of something neither had asked for, and both instinctively understood. The bond was not a magical thing. It was chemical. Pheromones and genetic markers that signaled the potential for strong offspring. For a pack, it was powerful. For an alpha king without an heir, it was a weapon. For a girl volunteering for execution, it was leverage. Thorn saw the moment she understood, saw her eyes sharpen with calculation, even as her body responded to his proximity. She was not lost in the bond, she was weaponizing it. He respected that. "Your name," he said. His voice was low, pitched for her ears alone. She held his gaze. When she spoke, her voice was rough from disuse, but it was steady. "Sarah Nightbrook." Not Omega, not tribute. A name, an identity, a claim to personhood that the ceremonial dress and chains were meant to strip away. Thorn reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch if she was going to. She did not. His fingers touched the iron manacle on her right wrist, and the contact sent a jolt of electricity through the bond that made them both inhale sharply. The lock was a simple thing. He broke it with a twist of his fingers, the metal screaming in protest. The manacle fell to the stone with a heavy clang that echoed across the silent courtyard. He did the same with the left, and the chains fell away. The raw skin beneath made something cold and furious move through his chest. His wolf, so long silent, made a sound that was not quite a growl and not quite a whimper. Thorn looked past Sarah to the envoy, who had gone pale as death. "Tell Garrick," he said, his voice carrying like the crack of breaking ice, "that I have received his message. Tell him I will send my response in 3 days." It was dismissal. The envoy knew it. The guards knew it. They retreated to their wagon with the haste of men who had been granted an unexpected reprieve from execution, and within minutes, the courtyard was empty except for Thorn, Sarah, and Magnus, standing silent witness from the wall. Thorn turned his attention back to the girl. She had not moved. She stood with her hands at her sides, the marks of the chains vivid against her pale skin, and waited. "You volunteered," he said, still not a question. "Yes." "Why?" She met his eyes without hesitation. "Because you are going to lose this war." The audacity of it struck him like a physical blow. Magnus made a sound from the wall that might have been a laugh or a cough. Thorn felt the corners of his mouth want to lift in something that had no business being amusement. "You came here to tell me I am losing. I came here to offer you a way to win." She tilted her head slightly, and he caught the scent of her again, stronger now without the iron between them. But first you need to decide if you are going to kill me or listen to me." Thorne studied her for a long moment. She was 19, maybe 20, too young to have the kind of tactical confidence in her voice, too small to be standing in his courtyard making demands, too smart to be the throwaway piece Garrick had claimed she was. "Come," he said, and turned toward the keep. She followed without hesitation, which told him she had already made her choice about which was more dangerous, staying in Silverwood or taking her chances with the monster king. The chamber Thorne led her to was not a bedroom. It was a strategic planning room in the heart of the mountain, windowless and secure. Maps covered every surface. Intelligence reports lay in organized stacks. A single chair sat before a table that held the weight of a kingdom's survival. He did not offer her the chair. Instead, he positioned himself between her and the door and waited. Sarah's eyes moved across the room, taking in details with the same systematic precision she had shown in the courtyard. She saw the maps, saw the troop positions marked in his own hand, saw the supply calculations and the weather predictions, and the scout reports still sealed with wax. "You are not what they said you would be," she said quietly. "What did they say I would be?" "A monster, a berserker who killed his own father in a fit of madness, a wolf so cursed that he cannot hear his own spirit." She looked at him directly. "They said you were more beast than man." "And what do you see?" "A tactician." She gestured to the maps. "A commander who understands logistics and terrain, someone who has been fighting a defensive war for 10 years because he cannot afford the casualties of an offensive push." Thorne felt something shift in his assessment of her. "You have been paying attention. I have been invisible for 6 years. People forget that invisible does not mean deaf or blind." She moved closer to the table, her eyes on a map of the southern border. "Garrick thinks you are a brute. He thinks you fight with rage instead of strategy. He is wrong. And you know this because? Because if you were what he thinks you are, this war would have ended years ago, one way or another. You would have either crushed us with superior numbers or died trying. Instead, you have been bleeding Silverwood slowly, wearing us down, waiting for something." She was right. Thorne had been waiting for Garrick to overextend, waiting for the southern clans to show their hand, waiting for an opening that did not cost him half his fighting force to exploit. "Why did you volunteer to come here?" he asked again. This time, she answered with something that sounded like truth. "Because Garrick murdered my parents. Because he has been planning something with the southern clans that will end badly for everyone. And because I have been gathering information for 6 years, waiting for a chance to use it." Thorne studied her face, looked for the tells that would indicate deception, found none, just cold fury and calculated risk. "Information," he repeated. "Garrick is fortifying the eastern border because he expects a two-front assault. He has supply caches hidden in the old mine network that your scouts have not found. And he is meeting with Southern Clan Alpha Magnus Blackthorn in 6 days to finalize an alliance that will double his fighting force." The room went very quiet. Thorne's mind was already calculating timelines and troop movements. If what she said was true, if Garrick had that kind of support coming, why should I believe you? Sarah reached into the bodice of the white dress and pulled out a small, folded piece of parchment. She placed it on the table between them. "Because I brought proof." Thorne unfolded the paper. It was a supply manifest in Garrick's own hand, detailing weapons shipments and storage locations. The kind of document that would only exist in the Alpha's private study. The kind of document that would get someone killed for stealing. "How did you get this?" "I clean his study every morning for 6 years." Her voice was flat. "He does not see servants." Thorne looked up from the manifest to the girl who had walked into the heart of his territory with treason in her bodice and calculation in her eyes. "You are offering to be my spy." "I am offering to be your asset. You give me a reason to trust you, and I give you intelligence that will end this war." "And what reason could I possibly give you to trust me? I am your enemy. You are Garrick's enemy. That makes us allies." She gestured to the manifest. "Verify it. Send scouts to the locations I have marked. When you find the caches, we can discuss terms." She was audacious, dangerous, and either the most valuable intelligence asset he had stumbled across in 10 years or the most elaborate trap Garrick had ever set. Thorne folded the manifest and tucked it into his belt. "If this is a trap, if you have come here to feed me false intelligence, I will know, and you will not enjoy what happens after. If this were a trap, I would not have volunteered to deliver it personally." She met his eyes without flinching. "I want Garrick dead. I want justice for my parents, and I want to make sure that when this war ends, it does not leave the Pax in worse shape than they started. That is all I want. And the bond? He watched her carefully. Our wolves recognized each other. You felt it. I felt it. She did not look away. Biology is not destiny. It is a tool. We can use it or ignore it, but it does not change what I am offering or what I am asking in return. Thorn felt his respect for her increase another notch. She was not going to pretend the bond did not exist, but she was not going to let it control her either. Practical, tactical, dangerous in all the right ways. There is a war council in 1 hour, he said. You will attend. You will present your intelligence to my commanders. If they verify your information and believe you are genuine, we will discuss what comes next. And if they do not believe me, then you will be my prisoner until I decide what to do with you. She nodded once, accepting the terms without argument. Fair enough. Die. The War Council chamber was carved from the same black stone as the rest of the keep, but it was larger, with a massive table at its center and chairs for 20 senior commanders. When Thorn entered with Sarah at his side, the room went silent. Magnus was already there, along with 3 other senior officers. They looked at the girl with varying degrees of suspicion and hostility. An Omega in the war room was unprecedented. An Omega from Silverwood was an insult. Thorn took his place at the head of the table. This is Sarah Nightbrook. She claims to have intelligence on Silverwood's defensive positions and supply networks. I want verification before we make decisions. Magnus's eyes narrowed. She could be a plant. Garrick could have sent her to feed us false information. He could have. Thorn spread the manifest on the table, which is why we are going to verify. Sarah, show them what you showed me. For the next hour, Sarah detailed supply routes and cache locations with a precision that would have been impressive in a trained scout. She drew maps from memory, marked patrol schedules, identified weak points in Silverwood's defenses that Thorn's own intelligence had missed. The commanders listened with growing interest. When she mentioned the meeting with Magnus Blackthorn of the Southern clans, the atmosphere in the room shifted from skepticism to focused attention. If Garrick secures that alliance, Magnus said slowly, we cannot win a war on 2 fronts. No, Thorn agreed, which is why we need to know if this intelligence is accurate. He turned to his head scout, a lean wolf named Finn, with eyes like a hawk. Take a small team. Fast reconnaissance. Check the first 3 cache locations she marked. Report back by nightfall. Finn nodded and left immediately. The council waited. Sarah stood silent through it all, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression neutral. She did not fidget, did not try to convince them further. She had made her case, and now she waited for them to verify or condemn. Thorn watched her and wondered what kind of 6 years she had endured to forge this kind of composure. When the council dismissed to wait for Finn's report, Magnus pulled Thorn aside. If she is telling the truth, she is the most valuable asset we have gained in years. If she is lying, she is the most dangerous threat. I know. And the bond? I saw how you looked at her in the courtyard. Thorn met his old friend's eyes. The bond is real. She felt it too. But she is not here because of it. She is here for revenge and strategy. The bond is secondary. Is it? Magnus's voice held a note of concern. Because your wolf moved today. I saw it in your eyes. First time in 10 years, Thorn. I know what I saw. Thorn's voice was quiet. And I know what it means. But that does not change what needs to happen. If her intelligence is good, we use it. The bond makes her valuable, but it does not make her trustworthy. Not yet. Magnus nodded slowly. And if the intelligence is false? Then we find out what Garrick is really playing at. Either way, she gave us something to work with. Finn returned as the sun touched the western peaks. He strode into the council chamber with dirt on his clothes and triumph in his eyes. The caches are real. All 3 locations. Weapons, food stores, medical supplies. Enough to support a sustained campaign. He dropped a bundle on the table. It was a Silverwood supply pack, marked with their sigil. She was not lying. The council erupted in discussion. Thorn held up a hand for silence. Sarah Nightbrook has proven her value. The question now is what we do with this information. We strike, said one of the younger commanders. Hit the caches, cripple their supply line. No. Sarah's voice cut across the room. Every head turned toward her. She had been so silent they had almost forgotten she was there. If you strike now, Garrick will know there is a leak. He will lock down information and you will lose your advantage. You need to wait. Wait for what? The young commander's tone was hostile. "Wait for the meeting with Blackthorn. If you can disrupt that alliance before it forms, you do not have to fight a two-front war, and I can help you do it." Magnus leaned forward. "How?" "Send me back." The room went dead silent. Thorn felt something cold move through his chest. "Explain." Sarah turned to face him directly. "I go back as your spy. Garrick thinks I am dead or in your dungeons. He will not expect me to return. I can sabotage the meeting from the inside, destroy the trust between Silverwood and the southern clans before the alliance is sealed." "And if you are caught?" "Then I die, which was the plan when I volunteered anyway." Her voice was matter-of-fact. "But if I succeed, you will have confirmation of the meeting details, access to Garrick's war plans, and a shattered alliance, worth the risk." "It is suicide," Magnus said flatly. "It is tactics." Sarah did not look away from Thorn. "You said yourself you cannot win a two-front war. I am offering you a way to ensure you only fight one." Thorn studied her face, saw the determination there, the cold calculation, and beneath it, the burning need for revenge that mirrored his own hunger for justice. "If I send you back, you will be alone. I cannot extract you if things go wrong. You will be completely exposed. I have been alone in enemy territory for 6 years. This is not different." "It is different." His voice was low, meant for her alone. "Because this time, if you die, I will feel it." She understood. The bond. If she died, his wolf would know, would feel the severing. It would be a pain he had not allowed himself to be vulnerable to in a decade. "Then you will have to trust that I am as good at surviving as I am at gathering intelligence." She tilted her head slightly. "Unless you have a better plan." He did not, and they both knew it. "There is one thing we need to do first," Thorn said. He gestured to Magnus. "Clear the room." The commanders filed out, curiosity and concern written on their faces. When the door closed, leaving only Thorn, Sarah, and Magnus, Thorn turned to face her fully. "If you go back, you need protection. The kind that cannot be taken away by Garrick or anyone else." She was quick. He saw understanding dawn in her eyes. "The mate bond. If I mark you, if we seal the bond, you will have the political protection of being the Alpha King's mate. Even Garrick will not dare to execute you outright without triggering a blood feud. And you will be able to track me, know if I am in danger." "Yes." She was silent for a long moment, weighing the cost. "This is not about the bond itself. This is tactical." "Yes. And afterward, when this is over, we negotiate that when we both survive." He held her gaze. "But you should know that I do not take the bond lightly, even as a tactical decision. Once it is sealed, it is permanent." "I understand." Magnus cleared his throat. "This is madness. Both of you know this is madness. War is madness." Thorn did not look away from Sarah. "We just choose which madness serves us best." Sarah stepped closer. Close enough that he could smell the fear beneath her courage. Close enough that the bond hummed between them like a living thing. "Do it," she said. Thorn moved without hesitation. The bite was not gentle. It was a claim and a promise and a tactical decision all forged into one moment of searing pain and absolute commitment. His teeth broke the skin at the juncture of her neck and shoulder, and the bond that had been chemistry became something deeper. Blood and spirit, two wolves recognizing each other across the void. Sarah gasped, her fingers digging into his shoulders. He felt the moment her wolf, silent and protective for so long, rose to meet his, not with words, but with acknowledgement, with acceptance. Her wolf had been waiting, waiting for safety, waiting for a bond strong enough to speak through. When he pulled back, the mark was already forming, a silvery tracery of scars that would identify her as his to any wolf with eyes to see. She touched the mark with shaking fingers. "I feel you, and my wolf. She is here. Finally here. And I feel you." It was true. Through the bond, he could sense her determination, her fear, her absolute commitment to seeing this through, and beneath it all, the awakening of a wolf that had never been broken, only patient. "If you are in danger, I will know. Then I will try not to give you a reason to worry." She was being flippant, but he could feel the truth beneath the words. She was terrified, and she was going anyway. Magnus stepped forward and placed a pack on the table. Supplies, coded messages, emergency signals, everything a spy in deep cover might need. His gruff voice held a note of respect. "Try not to get yourself killed, girl. It would be a waste." Sarah picked up the pack. "I will do my best." Thorn watched as she prepared to leave. watched as she transformed from the girl in the white dress to the spy about to walk back into the heart of enemy territory. And through the bond, he felt her resolve crystallize into something hard and unbreakable. 3 days, he said. In 3 days, I want confirmation of the meeting location and time. If I do not hear from you, I am coming to get you. You will hear from me. She looked at him one last time, and through the bond, he felt something that might have been gratitude or might have been goodbye. Thank you for listening. Then she was gone, slipping out through the servants' entrance into the pre-dawn darkness, and Thorn was left with the ghost of her scent and the new, fragile thread of the bond connecting them across the distance. Magnus moved to stand beside him. That was either the best decision you have ever made or the worst. I know. And if she does not come back? Thorn was silent for a long moment, feeling the bond settle into the hollow spaces of his chest where his wolf's voice used to be. Then Garrick will learn what happens when someone takes what is mine. It was a promise and a threat, and the first time in 10 years that Thorn had allowed himself to care about something beyond duty and survival. Through the bond, faint and distant, he felt Sarah moving south, felt her fear and determination in equal measure, felt her alive and committed and walking into danger with her eyes wide open, felt her wolf, newly awakened, moving with confidence born of patience, finally rewarded. He returned to the war room and began to plan. Sarah made it back to Silverwood as the sun crested the eastern hills. She had hidden the supplies Thorn gave her in a cache outside the territory and returned with nothing but the clothes on her back and a story about escaping during a moment of chaos. The guards who found her were suspicious, but not hostile. Garrick would want to question her himself. She let them take her to the Alpha's study, where Garrick sat behind his massive desk with the morning light turning his gray hair to silver. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the flash of surprise before he controlled his expression. "Sarah Nightbrook, we thought you dead." "I escaped during the transfer to the dungeons. There was a fight between the guards about who would have first use of the tribute. I ran." It was a lie calculated to play on his assumptions about the savage Mountain King and his brutal warriors. Garrick's expression showed he believed it. "And they did not pursue?" "They did. I hid in the old mine tunnels, waited 3 days before making my way back." Garrick studied her for a long moment. "You are either very lucky or very resourceful." "I am stubborn." She met his eyes. "You sent me to die. I decided I was not ready." A thin smile crossed his face. "Well, you are back now, and since you have seen the inside of the Black Mountain stronghold, perhaps you can be of use after all. Tell me everything you saw." And so she did. She told him about the outer defenses and the guard rotations and the layout of the lower levels. All of it true, all of it exactly what a captured tribute would have seen. And she said nothing about the war room or the intelligence she had provided, or the bite mark hidden beneath her high collar, or the wolf now moving confidently in her chest, ready to fight when the time came. Through the bond, faint but present, she felt Thorn's awareness of her, his steady presence like an anchor in deep water. She was exactly where she needed to be. The game had begun. Day 1. The first coded message arrived as dawn broke over Black Ridge. Thorn found it where Sarah had said it would be, wedged into a crack in the stone marker that stood at the boundary between their lands, a place both sides claimed and neither truly controlled. The parchment was no larger than his palm, the writing so small it required lamplight to decipher. Summit confirmed, 6 days from today, eastern border, old trading post. Blackthorn bringing 20 warriors, Garrick paranoid, doubled patrols, weapons cache at grid reference 7 Mark III, new intelligence, Wolfsbane gas grenades, Southern Clan technology, designed to weaken shifters without killing, purpose unknown. She had signed it with a single letter, S. Through the bond, he could feel her alive and moving. The connection was not strong enough for words or complex emotions, but he knew when she was afraid and when she was safe. Right now, she registered as tense but functional, working. Magnus read the message over his shoulder. "Wolfsbane gas, that is a problem. That is more than a problem. That is a shift in tactics." Thorn's mind was already running calculations. If they can weaken us without killing us, they can take prisoners, hostages, leverage. Or, Magnus said slowly, they can disable an Alpha King long enough to capture him for a very public execution. The thought had already occurred to Thorn. It was what he would do if the positions were reversed. Kill the king in front of his people, break their morale, End the war through psychological warfare rather than grinding attrition. Double the guard rotations. No one travels alone. And get our chemists working on countermeasures. If Sarah says they have wolfsbane gas, they have it. Day 2 brought a second message. Troop movements, supply deliveries, guard rotation changes, all of it detailed with the precision of a career intelligence officer. Day 3, another message. Weak points in the eastern defenses, timing windows for approach. Day 4, the message that changed everything arrived at dawn. Meeting moved up. Tomorrow night instead of 6 days. Garrick suspects leak, changing plans. I have sabotage opportunity but need diversion. Can you create noise on western border at sunset tomorrow? We'll handle the rest. Trust me. Thorne read it 3 times. Through the bond, he felt her urgency, her fear, and underneath it all, her absolute determination. Magnus saw his expression. What does she need? A diversion, western border, sunset tomorrow, day 5. That is the opposite direction from the meeting. Exactly. She wants to pull Garrick's attention away from the east while she works. Thorne looked up from the message. She is going to sabotage the summit herself. Alone? That is suicide. That is what she does best. Operate alone while everyone underestimates her. Thorne began issuing orders to the runners who waited nearby. Full cavalry drill on the western approach. Make it loud. Make it visible. I want Garrick to think we are massing for an assault. The preparations took the rest of day 4. By sunset on day 5, 200 mounted warriors were making enough noise on the western hills to wake the dead. They did not cross into Silverwood territory, but they made it clear they could. Thorne stood on the ridge and watched the sun bleed red across the mountains. Through the bond, he felt Sarah moving, felt her fear spike and then settle into cold focus. Whatever she was doing it now. Show. Sarah had exactly 30 minutes. The summit was being held in the old trading post, a stone structure that had once marked neutral ground between territories. Garrick and 20 of his best warriors were inside, along with Magnus Blackthorne and his southern delegation. She had volunteered to help with the meal service. No one questioned the quiet Omega carrying trays of food. No one saw her pocket the small clay grenades from the cache she had marked for Thorne's forces. The same wolfsbane gas grenades the southern clans had brought as a demonstration of their technological superiority. She waited until the dinner was in full swing, until Garrick and Blackthorne were deep in discussion about territory divisions and military support. Then she excused herself to the kitchen, moved to the storage cellar where they kept the weapons demonstration materials, and began her work. The grenades were simple. Clay vessels filled with concentrated wolfsbane extract in aerosol form. When broken, they released a cloud that would weaken any shifter who breathed it. Not fatal, but incapacitating enough to make resistance difficult. Sarah had counted 12 grenades in the demonstration case. She took 6 and replaced them with cooking vessels filled with nothing but smoke powder and red clay dust. The weight was identical, the appearance nearly perfect. Only a chemical analysis would reveal the substitution. It took her 20 minutes. She used the last 10 to plant evidence. A strand of hair from one of Blackthorne's warriors in Garrick's private study. A piece of torn cloth bearing the Southern clan sigil hidden in the weapons cache. Small inconsistencies that would breed suspicion. She did not need to destroy the alliance. She just needed to crack the foundation of trust. Through the bond, she felt Thorne's awareness like a steady hand on her shoulder. He knew she was in danger, knew she was committed, and she could feel his faith in her capability flowing back through the connection. Her wolf, newly awakened and moving with growing confidence, added its own steady presence, no longer hiding, ready to fight if needed. It steadied her hands as she returned to the kitchen and resumed her serving duties. The summit continued for another hour. Sarah kept her head down and her movements efficient. When Garrick finally called for the weapons demonstration, she was serving wine in the corner, invisible as always. Blackthorne's weapons master brought out the case of grenades, explained the technology with pride, selected one of the vessels Sarah had replaced, and threw it into the practice yard. It exploded in a cloud of red dust and harmless smoke. The silence that followed was absolute. "What is this?" Garrick's voice was dangerously soft. Blackthorne's weapons master stared at the red cloud dissipating in the evening air. "I do not understand. The grenades were sealed. I checked them myself this morning." "Check them again." The weapons master opened the case. One by one, he tested the remaining grenades. Half were real, filled with wolfsbane. Half were Sarah's replacements, filled with harmless powder. Garrick's expression went from confusion to cold fury. "You brought me defective weapons. Is this your idea of good faith?" I brought you the finest weapons the southern smiths could produce. Blackthorn's voice was tight with anger. If there is sabotage here, it came from your territory, not mine. Are you accusing me of sabotaging my own alliance? I am saying someone did, and since we are in your stronghold, surrounded by your warriors, perhaps you should look to your own security. The argument escalated, voices rose, accusations flew. The careful diplomacy that had taken weeks to build crumbled in minutes. Sarah kept her head down and continued pouring wine. No one looked at the servants. No one ever did. By the time the summit collapsed entirely, with Blackthorn storming out and Garrick raging at his advisors, Sarah had already slipped away. She recovered the real grenades from where she had hidden them, packed them carefully, and made her way to the northern cache where she could leave them for Thorn's forces to collect. Through the bond she sent a pulse of success, of mission accomplished, of still alive. The answering warmth that came back felt like a soldier's nod of respect. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the satisfaction of a job well done. Then she returned to Silverwood's main compound to see what chaos she had unleashed. Day 6. The chaos was worse than she expected. Garrick's paranoia had reached critical mass. He was convinced there was a spy in his inner circle. He just did not know who. Guards who had served for years found themselves under suspicion. Advisors were questioned. Patrols were doubled and then tripled. Sarah kept her head down and waited. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's steady presence. He had received her signal. He knew the summit had failed. Now they both waited to see what Garrick would do next. The answer came on day 8. Sarah was in the servants' quarters when she heard the boots in the hallway. Too many boots, moving with purpose. She knew what it meant before they kicked in her door. 6 warriors flooded the small room. One of them was Riker, Garrick's master scout, the man who should have been with Thorn's forces, but whom Sarah had seen at the summit. The man whose voice she had heard discussing betrayal. Sarah Nightbrook. Riker's smile was cold. The Alpha wants to see you. She did not resist as they hauled her from the room, did not fight as they marched her through the compound. But through the bond, she sent a spike of fear so sharp it would have woken Thorn from a dead sleep. Through the connection, she felt his instant response, felt his wolf rise to the surface, felt the cold rage that meant he was already moving. Garrick was waiting in the same study where she had first heard him plot her death. He sat behind his desk with the morning light turning his hair to silver, and his eyes held the flat emptiness of a man who had already decided on execution. "You escaped from Black Ridge," he said without preamble. "Or so you claimed. But my scouts have been watching the boundary markers. Someone has been leaving messages. Someone with access to my war councils and my private studies." Sarah said nothing. There was nothing to say. Denial would be useless. Confession would be suicide. "I had my doubts about your story from the beginning," Garrick continued. "But I thought perhaps you were simply lucky. Perhaps the Mountain King had grown careless in his old age. Then the summit fails, my alliance crumbles, and I find evidence of sabotage in my own stronghold." He stood and walked around the desk, slowly, like a predator circling wounded prey. "So I asked myself, who had the opportunity? Who had the access? Who did I underestimate because I assumed weakness where there might be cunning?" He stopped in front of her. "And I kept coming back to you, the quiet little Omega who escaped from the Black Mountain, who walked back into my territory without a scratch, who has been serving in my war councils for 6 years without anyone paying attention." Sarah met his eyes. "You have no proof." "I have enough. And in war, suspicion is the same as guilt." He nodded to Riker. "Take her to the cells. We will see what the Mountain King does when he learns his spy has been captured." Riker grabbed her arm with bruising force, but before he could drag her from the room, Garrick held up a hand. "Wait." He stepped closer to Sarah, his eyes narrowing. "There is something else, something I am missing." He reached out and pulled down the high collar she had worn for days. The mate mark blazed silver against her skin. The room went deadly silent. "Well," Garrick said softly, "that explains quite a bit." Through the bond, Sarah felt Thorn's rage ignite like wildfire, felt the moment he shifted, felt him mobilize his forces with the cold precision of a commander who had just been given a target, and she knew with absolute certainty that war was coming. Not in days, not in hours. Now. Day 8, Hour 1. Thorn felt the bond flare with terror, and he was moving before conscious thought caught up with action. Magnus found him in the armory, already strapping on weapons with hands that moved on pure instinct. "She has been compromised." Magnus did not question, did not ask for proof. He simply began issuing orders to the warriors who materialized in response to their alpha's fury. How many? All of them. Every warrior we can muster. We leave in 20 minutes. Thorn, this could be a trap. Garrick could be using her to draw you out. I know. Thorn's voice was flat and cold and absolutely certain. I am coming anyway. Because there were some things worth more than tactical advantage, some things worth the risk of a trap, and the woman who had walked into enemy territory to save his kingdom was one of them. Day 8, Hour 2. The war party that thundered out of Black Ridge was not the careful strategic force Thorn usually commanded. It was a rescue operation fueled by bond-deep rage and the kind of fury that made mountains tremble. They rode hard toward Silverwood, and Thorn felt every second of the distance through the bond, felt Sarah's fear, felt her pain as they threw her into a cell, felt her absolute refusal to break. Day 8, Hour 6. When they crossed into Silverwood territory, without bothering with reconnaissance or stealth, they ran straight into the ambush. Riker had been busy. The wolfsbane gas hit them in a choke point between two ridges, where the road narrowed and the trees grew thick. Clay grenades exploded in sequence, releasing clouds of concentrated extract that turned the air into poison. Thorn felt his wolf weaken immediately. Around him, his warriors struggled as their enhanced senses became liabilities. The gas burned in their lungs, sapped their strength, made shifting impossible. And then the attack came. Silverwood warriors poured from the tree line. Not to kill, but to capture. They carried nets treated with wolfsbane, chains, restraints designed for prisoners, not corpses. Thorn understood in a flash of tactical clarity. This was exactly what he had feared. Garrick did not want him dead. He wanted him captured, wanted to parade the Black Mountain King in chains before executing him publicly. Psychological warfare at its finest. Through the haze of gas and fighting, Thorn saw Riker directing the assault with the precision of a man who knew exactly how his enemy would respond. The traitor had been feeding Garrick intelligence for months, had been waiting for exactly this moment. Thorn's forces were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, weakened by gas and caught in a kill zone. It was, tactically speaking, a perfect trap, which meant he needed to do something completely irrational. Magnus! Thorn's voice cut through the chaos. East Ridge! Break for the high ground! Magnus understood instantly. The eastern ridge was the opposite direction from retreat. It was deeper into enemy territory. It made no tactical sense, which was exactly why it might work. Thorn gathered the warriors closest to him and charged uphill into the teeth of the ambush. The unexpected move bought them seconds of confusion, and seconds were enough. They broke through the encirclement and scrambled up the rocky slope. The wolfsbane gas was thicker at ground level. The higher they climbed, the cleaner the air became. Thorn felt his wolf begin to recover, felt strength returning to his limbs. Behind them, Silverwood warriors gave chase. But the ridge was steep and treacherous, and Thorn's forces knew mountain terrain in a way lowland wolves never would. Day 8, Hour 7. They made it to the top of the ridge as the sun began to set. Thorn counted heads. 20 warriors had made it out of the ambush, 20 out of the 100 he had brought. The rest were either dead or captured. Magnus appeared at his side, bleeding from a gash across his ribs but still functional. We are cut off. Silverwood holds the valley behind us. The southern approach is probably already reinforced. We are trapped. Thorn looked down at the burning remains of their supply wagons in the valley below, looked at the 20 exhausted warriors who had followed him into this mess, looked at the darkening sky, and calculated their chances of survival. Not good. Through the bond, he felt Sarah's terror spike. She knew he was in trouble, knew he had walked into a trap for her, and he felt her guilt like a knife between his ribs. He sent back the only message the bond could carry, a pulse of warmth that meant, I chose this, no regrets. We dig in, he said aloud. This ridge has water and defensible positions. We hold here and make them pay for every foot of ground. One of the younger warriors, a man named Cade, who had earned his first battle scars only months before, spoke up. My king, we cannot win this. We are outnumbered 5-1. Then we make sure we are worth 10 of them. Thorn began issuing orders with the calm precision of a commander who had made peace with the possibility of death. Perimeter defenses, watches in 3-hour rotations. Anyone who can still fight, prepare weapons. We hold until extraction is possible or we die trying. The warriors moved to obey, not because they thought they would survive, but because their alpha had given an order and dying with purpose was better than dying in chaos. Magnus waited until they were alone before speaking. "You came for her." "I did, even knowing it was likely a trap." "Yes." Magnus was silent for a moment. "She was worth it." "She is." Thorn felt the bond pulse with Sarah's presence, still alive, still fighting. "And I am going to get her out of here if it costs me everything." The old warrior nodded slowly. "Then we better make sure you survive long enough to try." "Sha." Day 8, hour 19. The first assault came at midnight. Silverwood forces tried to rush the ridge under cover of darkness. They met a wall of coordinated defense that turned the narrow approach into a killing ground. Thorn's warriors might have been outnumbered, but they were mountain wolves fighting on mountain terrain. The attack broke after 20 minutes. Silverwood pulled back, leaving 6 dead and twice that many wounded. Thorn walked the perimeter as his warriors reset their defenses, checked on injuries, redistributed ammunition, made sure everyone had water and whatever food they had managed to salvage. Cade was on watch at the southern approach. The young warrior had a makeshift bandage around his left arm and determination in his eyes that reminded Thorn of himself 20 years ago. "How is the arm?" Thorn asked. "Functional, my king. I can still hold a weapon." "Good man." Thorn paused, then asked the question that had been weighing on him. "Do you know why we are here? Why we rode into this?" Cade did not hesitate. "For the woman who risked everything to save our kingdom, for the spy who gave us intelligence that could end this war, for your mate." "For all of that," Thorn agreed, "but also because some things are worth more than tactical advantage. Some things define who we are. We do not leave our people behind, ever, even when the smart move is to cut losses and retreat." Cade looked at him with something like awe. "My father said you were the finest commander he ever served under. Said you never asked your warriors to do anything you would not do yourself. I understand now what he meant." Thorn felt the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders. "Your father was Kieran. Died in the Western Campaign 6 years ago." "Yes, my king. He was a good man. Held a bridge for 3 hours while we evacuated civilians. Saved 40 lives before he fell." Thorn met the young warrior's eyes. "You have his courage. Use it to stay alive tonight." "I will, my king." Day 9, hour 6. The second assault came at dawn. This time, Silverwood used archers to soften the defenses before sending in ground forces. Thorn's warriors returned fire with brutal efficiency, but ammunition was finite and the enemy seemed endless. By the time the sun cleared the eastern peaks, they had held the ridge for 8 hours. They had also lost 3 warriors and were running dangerously low on supplies. Magnus found Thorn checking the last of their water reserves. "We have enough for maybe another 12 hours. After that, we will be too weak to fight effectively. Then we need to be gone before that becomes a problem." "Gone where? Every approach is covered." Thorn pulled out the map he had been studying between assaults. "There. The old mine tunnels. Sarah mentioned them in her first message. Said she hid there when she escaped. If we can reach the entrance, we can move underground. That is half a mile from here, through open ground, under direct fire from Silverwood positions." "I know." Thorn looked at the warriors scattered across the ridge, exhausted, wounded, still fighting. "But staying here is slow death. Moving is a chance." Magnus considered for a long moment, then nodded. "When?" "Tonight, full dark. We go fast and quiet. Anyone who cannot keep pace gets left behind with supplies to hold the position, make Silverwood think we are still dug in." It was a brutal calculus, leaving wounded warriors to certain capture or death, but it was also the only way to give the rest a fighting chance. Magnus saw the cost in Thorn's expression. Command is making choices where all the options are bad and living with the consequences. "Yes. Your father never learned that lesson." Thorn looked at his oldest friend. "No. He thought power meant never having to choose, never having to sacrifice. It made him dangerous to everyone, including his own people." "You are not him." "I know, but sometimes I understand him better than I want to." Day 9, hour 18. That night they made their move. 15 warriors, including Thorn and Magnus. They left 5 behind with the last of the ammunition and instructions to make as much noise as possible for as long as possible. Cade volunteered to be one of those who stayed. Thorn tried to order him to come, but the young warrior refused. "My father held a bridge for 3 hours, my king. I can hold a ridge for 1. Give you time to get clear." There was no argument that would change his mind. Thorn clasped his shoulder. "Your father would be proud." "I hope to make you proud as well, my king." They left at midnight, moving like ghosts through the darkness. Behind them, Cade and the others began their diversionary assault, filling the night with the sounds of battle. The run to the mine entrance was the longest half-mile of Thorne's life. They moved through underbrush and over stone, every step expecting the cry of alarm that would bring Silverwood down on them. Twice they passed within 50 feet of enemy patrols. Twice they held their breath and trusted darkness and desperation to hide them. Day 9, hour 19. They made it to the mine entrance as the sounds of fighting from the ridge reached a crescendo. Thorne felt the moment Cade fell through the bond. Not his own bond, but the pack bond that connected all of them, a bright flare of life extinguished too soon. He did not allow himself to stop, did not allow himself to grieve. He just kept moving, leading his remaining warriors into the darkness beneath the earth. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded. Ahead, the unknown waited. Through the bond, he felt Sarah's sudden awareness of his proximity, felt her hope flare bright and desperate. He was coming, not with an army, not with overwhelming force, but with what he had left and the absolute refusal to leave her behind. Chum. Day 9, hour 21. The tunnels were a maze of darkness and forgotten passages. Thorne led his warriors by touch and instinct, following the faint current of air that meant eventual egress. They moved in silence, weapons ready, ears straining for any sound of pursuit. After an hour, they found a chamber large enough to rest. Thorne called a halt and took stock. 15 warriors, down from the 100 he had started with. All of them wounded to some degree, all of them exhausted. Magnus slumped against the wall beside him. We are inside Silverwood's main territory now. Getting to Sarah means going through the heart of their compound. I know. 15 warriors against an entire pack. I know that too. Thorne could feel Sarah through the bond, could sense her fear and her hope and her absolute determination to survive. But we have advantages. We are already behind their lines. They think we are trapped on the ridge, and Sarah knows we are coming. How? The bond. She can feel me getting closer, which means she can help us from the inside. It was a slim hope, but it was more than they had an hour ago. Finn, the lean tracker who had verified Sarah's first intelligence, spoke up from the darkness. I know these tunnels. Used to run smuggling operations through here before the war. There is a passage that comes up inside the old cold storage building, abandoned now, but it is only 200 yards from the main compound cells. Can you get us there? Yes, my king. Then that is where we are going. Day 10, hour 1. They rested for 2 hours, eating the last of their field rations and binding wounds as best they could. Thorne used the time to send a pulse through the bond, a message of intent, of coming soon, of hold on. Sarah's response was immediate, a spike of acknowledgement and then something else, a pattern of emotion that felt like tactical information. Thorne closed his eyes and focused on the bond, felt Sarah deliberately cycling through emotions in sequence: fear, relief, fear, relief, fear, fear, relief. It took him a moment to understand. She was sending coded information. 2 guards, 1 relief rotation, 2 additional sentries. His mate was a genius. He sent back a pulse of understanding and felt her satisfaction even through the distance and stone. Magnus saw his expression. She is helping. She is telling me the guard rotations for her cell block. 2 guards, 1 relief pattern, 2 additional sentries. Clever woman. She is more than clever. She is exceptional. Day 10, hour 3. They moved out after the rest period, following Finn through passages that grew narrower and more treacherous. Twice they had to crawl on hands and knees through spaces that threatened to collapse. Once they heard voices above them and froze for 10 long minutes while a Silverwood patrol passed overhead. Finally, Finn held up a hand. The cold storage exit is ahead, 1 at a time, weapons ready. Thorne went first, pulling himself up through a narrow shaft that emerged in the corner of an abandoned building. The cold storage was exactly as Finn described: empty, dark, and close enough to the compound that he could hear the change of guard in the distance. His warriors emerged behind him, silent as shadows. 15 exhausted, wounded, desperate soldiers in the heart of enemy territory. It should have been suicide. But Thorne had not come this far to fail now. He could feel Sarah through the bond, could feel her so close it made his wolf howl with the need to reach her. 200 yards. That was all. 200 yards and an unknown number of guards between him and the woman who had risked everything for his people. Magnus, take 10 warriors, create a diversion on the west side of the compound, make noise, draw the guards away from the cells. And you? I am taking 4 warriors and going straight for Sarah. We get in, get her, and get out before they realize what is happening." "That is insane." "That is necessary." Thorn looked at his old friend. "I am not leaving her here." Magnus studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Make it count, my king. We will give you 10 minutes. After that, all hell breaks loose and you are on your own." 10 minutes is all I need." They separated, Magnus leading his group toward the western compound, Thorn taking Finn and 3 others directly toward the cells. Through the bond, he sent one final message, a pulse of pure intent. "Coming now." Sarah's response was immediate, a flare of readiness, of trust, and beneath it, her wolf coiling like a spring, ready to fight. Of 2 warriors about to do something incredibly stupid and completely necessary. Thorn moved through the darkness toward the cell block, and every step felt like coming home. Day 10, hour 4. The rescue took exactly 8 minutes. Finn picked the exterior lock while Thorn and the others provided cover. The 2 guards Magnus had pulled away for the diversion left only 1 sentry on the cell block door. Thorn killed him silently, efficiently, with the practiced brutality of a soldier who had made his peace with necessary violence. Inside, the cells were a row of iron cages built into the stone. Sarah was in the 3rd one, still wearing the servant's clothes she had been captured in, her face bruised, but her eyes blazing with fierce determination. She smiled when she saw him, actually smiled. "Took you long enough." Thorn felt something in his chest crack open at the sight of her alive and defiant and unbroken. Had to take the scenic route. Finn had the cell door open in seconds. Sarah stepped out and Thorn pulled her against him for one brief, desperate moment. Through the bond, he felt her relief and her pain and her absolute refusal to slow them down. "Can you run?" he asked. "I can do whatever is necessary." She looked at the 4 warriors who had come with him. "What is the extraction plan?" "Back through the tunnels. Magnus is creating a diversion to buy us time." "The tunnels are compromised. Garrick sent patrols down after you disappeared from the ridge. They are watching the exits." Of course they were. Thorn recalculated instantly. "Then we go up instead of down. Is there roof access?" "Through the old grain tower. But Thorn, there are 50 warriors between here and there." "Then we go through them." He looked at his small group of rescuers. "We move fast. We hit hard. Anyone who gets between us and that tower goes down. No mercy, no hesitation." They moved as one, a spear of violence cutting through the compound. The explosion of Magnus's diversion lit the night sky, drawing guards toward the western wall. But there were still too many warriors between them and freedom. Thorn fought with the cold precision of a man who had been doing this for 20 years. Beside him, Sarah moved with vicious efficiency. She was not a trained warrior, but her wolf, newly awakened and confident, lent her speed and instinct. She used weapons she found on fallen guards, used the environment, used every dirty trick in the book because no one had ever taught her to fight fair. And her wolf moved with her, not speaking but present, a steady pulse of strength and certainty that she had never known before. Thorn found himself watching her in the brief seconds between kills and feeling something like pride. They made it to the grain tower with 2 warriors down and everyone bleeding. The stairs were a nightmare of narrow switchbacks and stone that crumbled under their boots. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. At the top, the roof was exactly as Sarah described, flat, open, with a 20-foot gap to the next building and a 50-foot drop to the courtyard below. "Tell me you have a plan for this part," Sarah said, breathing hard. "Working on it." Thorn looked at the gap, looked at the drop, looked at the warriors pouring into the tower below them. "We jump." "That is your plan? Jump? You have a better one?" She looked at the gap, at the drop, at him. "You first. I want to see if it is possible before I try it." Despite everything, he laughed. It was a short, harsh sound, but it was real. "Fair enough." He backed up, gathered himself, and ran for the edge. The jump was pure momentum and desperation. He hit the next roof hard, rolled, came up ready to fight. Finn went next, making it across with room to spare. Then the other 2 warriors. Then Sarah. She did not hesitate, just ran and jumped like she had been doing this her entire life, her wolf lending strength to the leap. Thorn caught her as she landed, steadying her before releasing her to keep moving. Behind them, Silverwood warriors tried to follow. Some made it, most did not. They ran across 3 more rooftops before Thorn called a halt at the edge of the compound. Below them, the forest waited. Above them, the night sky was clear and cold. "Down," he ordered. "Use the drainage pipes. Move fast." One by one, they descended. It was awkward and exposed, and every second expected an arrow between the shoulder blades. But they made it, hit the ground running, and disappeared into the tree line as the entire compound erupted in pursuit. Through the darkness, through the forest, through territory he knew by instinct, and they knew by desperation, Thorn led his people toward safety. Beside him, Sarah ran without complaint, keeping pace despite her injuries, her wolf lending endurance. Through the bond he felt her determination, her trust, her absolute refusal to be the one who slowed them down. They ran until the sounds of pursuit faded, ran until the compound was miles behind them, ran until they crossed back into Black Ridge territory and could finally stop. Day 10, Hour 8. Magnus was waiting at the rendezvous point with what remained of his diversion team. 6 warriors out of 10. They looked at Thorn's group, counted heads, and understood the cost. But Sarah was free. The spy who had given them everything was safe. And through the bond, Thorn felt her overwhelming relief, her gratitude, and underneath it all, her love. She had not said the words, neither had he, but the bond carried truths that words could not touch. They had chosen each other. Through fire and blood and impossible odds, they had chosen each other. And now they would face whatever came next together. Day 13. The message from Magnus Blackthorn arrived 3 days after the rescue. Thorn read it in his war room while Sarah slept in the chamber they now shared. The rescue had cost them dearly, but it had also sent a message. The Black Mountain King protected his own. Anyone who wanted to test that would pay in blood. The message was written in formal diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. Alpha Thorn Blackridge. You have made war on Silverwood and disrupted the alliance I was building. You have cost me time and resources and political capital. For this, you will answer. I invoke the ancient law of single combat. You and I, 30 days hence, in the neutral arena. Winner takes both territories. Losers' people go free unharmed. Refuse, and I will join with Garrick to crush your mountain kingdom into dust. This is my oath before the goddess. Magnus Blackthorn, Alpha of the Southern Reach. Thorn set the letter down and looked at the map of his kingdom. At the territories he had defended for 10 years, at the people who trusted him to keep them safe. Single combat with Magnus Blackthorn, a warrior in his prime who had never known defeat. A fight Thorn would have to take while still recovering from the injuries of the rescue. A fight he would very likely lose. Through the bond, he felt Sarah wake, felt her attention focus on him across the distance, felt her question. He sent back a pulse of calm reassurance. Everything is fine. Go back to sleep. But she knew him too well. Through the bond, she felt his lie. And within minutes, she was in the war room, reading the challenge over his shoulder. You are going to accept, she said. It was not a question. I have to. It is the only way to avoid a two-front war. You are still injured. You have been awake for 3 days straight. You are in no condition to fight Blackthorn. I will be in 30 days. She was silent for a long moment. Then she moved to stand in front of him, her hands on his shoulders, her eyes fierce with determination. Then we have 30 days to make sure you win. And through the bond, he felt her absolute certainty that they would find a way, together. The training began before dawn the next morning. Sarah found Thorn in the practice yard, already moving through combat forms, despite the fact that his side was still wrapped in bandages from the rescue. His movements were slower than they should have been, stiffer. The kind of stiffness that came from injuries that had not fully healed being pushed too soon. She watched him for 5 minutes before speaking, long enough to catalog the weaknesses, the favoring of his left side, the slight hitch in his breathing when he extended too far, the way he compensated for reduced mobility in his shoulder. You are going to lose if you fight like that, she said. Thorn stopped mid-form and turned to face her. Sweat already dampened his hair despite the morning chill. Good morning to you as well. I am serious. Blackthorn is younger, faster, and he has not spent the last week bleeding in a forest. If you meet him strength against strength, you lose. I know. He picked up a practice blade from the weapons rack, which is why I have 30 days to get stronger. You will not be stronger than him in 30 days, not recovering from these injuries. She moved closer, her eyes tracking the way he held the blade. But you can be smarter. He tilted his head, listening. This was the Sarah he had come to respect, the tactician who saw angles other people missed. You taught me that the first day we met, she continued. The tribute was not just a girl. She was leverage, information, a tactical asset disguised as weakness. She gestured to his injuries. This is the same. They expect you broken, weakened, desperate. Use that. Use my injuries as an advantage. Use their assumptions as a weakness. Make Blackthorn think you are relying on brute force and pride. Then hit him where he does not expect it. She paused. I need to talk to the refugees, the ones who came from Southern Reach territory. I need to know everything about Blackthorn, how he fights, how he thinks, what he values. Thorn felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth despite the pain in his ribs. You are building an intelligence profile on my opponent. I am doing what I do best, gathering information while everyone underestimates the quiet one in the corner. She met his eyes. You saved my life. Let me help you keep yours. For the next 20 days, they fell into a rhythm. Thorn trained his body, pushing through pain to rebuild strength and flexibility. Sarah trained his mind, feeding him intelligence gathered from refugees, traders, and anyone who had spent time in Southern Reach territory. Her wolf, fully awakened now, moved with confident purpose, no longer hiding in the shadows of her consciousness, but present, alert, ready. She could feel its strength when she ran, its instincts when she fought. The years of silence had not weakened it. They had made it patient, strategic, dangerous. Magnus Blackthorn was 42 years old, a career warrior who had earned his position through combat prowess and tactical brilliance. He favored aggressive fighting styles, direct assaults, overwhelming force applied with precision. But he also had tells, a blind spot on his left side from an old injury that had never fully healed, a tendency to overcommit when he thought he had an advantage, and a strict code of honor that would not allow him to use underhanded tactics even when they would guarantee victory. Sarah compiled it all into a profile that would have impressed any military intelligence officer. She presented it to Thorn on the 20th day, spreading maps and notes across the war room table like a general planning a campaign. He will come at you hard and fast, she said, pointing to her analysis. He wants to end it quickly, prove his superiority. If you match that aggression, you play into his strength. So I do the opposite. Draw him out, make him work for every exchange. Make him chase, make him overextend. And when he commits to what he thinks is a killing blow, that is when you exploit the blind side. She traced a pattern on the practice diagram. 3 steps: evade, redirect, counter, use his momentum against him. Thorn studied the analysis with the focus of a man whose life depended on understanding it. You would have made an exceptional military commander. I did not want to command. I wanted justice. But I learned that sometimes you have to build an army to tear down a tyrant. She looked at him. Garrick taught me that. He made me invisible. So I became invisible in a way he never expected. I became the observer who saw everything and the ghost who could move unseen. And now? Now I am done being invisible. When this is over, when we win, I want to help rebuild. I want to make sure the next generation does not grow up thinking their only value is in being quiet and obedient. Through the bond, Thorn felt the fire beneath her words. The years of suppressed rage channeled into purpose. She was not asking for revenge anymore. She was asking for change. When we win, he said, emphasizing the first word, you will have whatever resources you need. We will rebuild this kingdom into something worth defending. She smiled. It was a rare expression on her face, made more powerful by its scarcity. Then let us make sure you survive to see it. The training intensified. Sarah drilled him on evasion patterns and counterstrikes until his body moved on instinct. Magnus joined them, adding his decades of combat experience to refine techniques. They sparred in the practice yard, worked through scenarios, identified weaknesses, and hammered them into strengths. On the 25th day, Finn brought news that changed everything. He found Thorn and Sarah in the war room, both bent over intelligence reports. The scout's face was grim. We have a problem. Riker has been spotted near the neutral arena. He had 6 warriors with him, all of them carrying equipment that looks like those wolfsbane grenades. Thorn felt ice slide down his spine. Blackthorn agreed to honorable single combat. He would not approve using chemical weapons. Blackthorn might not know, Sarah said quietly. Riker has been playing multiple sides since the beginning. What if he is planning to sabotage the fight, kill you both, and throw the territories into chaos? To what end? Power, or payment from someone who benefits from destabilization. She looked at Finn. Did you recognize any of the warriors with him? 2 were Silverwood. The others wore no pack markings. Mercenaries. Magnus spoke from the doorway. He had been listening. Riker is building his own force, planning to move in the confusion after the combat. Thorne's mind raced through possibilities. We need to know his exact plan, where he will be positioned, when he intends to strike. I can find out, Sarah said. Every head in the room turned toward her. Absolutely not, Thorne said flatly. You are not going anywhere near Riker. I am the only one who can get close enough without triggering suspicion. He thinks I am either dead or imprisoned. He will not expect me. She was already planning. Thorne could see it in her eyes. I go to the arena early, scout positions, identify his setup, then we counter it. It is too dangerous. Everything we have done has been dangerous. This is no different. She met his gaze steadily. You taught me tactics. Magnus taught me combat. Finn taught me reconnaissance. Let me use those skills. Thorne wanted to refuse, wanted to lock her in the safest room in the kingdom and keep her there until the threat passed. But he could feel her determination through the bond, could feel her absolute certainty that this was necessary. And he knew she was right. You do not go alone, he said finally. Finn goes with you. You scout from distance. No direct engagement. If Riker sees you, you retreat immediately. Agreed. They left that night. Thorne stood in the war room and felt Sarah move away through the bond, felt the distance stretch between them like a physical ache. Magnus joined him at the window. You are learning to trust her capability instead of just protecting her safety, the old warrior observed. I am learning that protecting her sometimes means letting her do what she does best, even when it terrifies me. Thorne touched his chest where the bond pulsed. She is not fragile. She never was. I just needed to see past the weakness everyone else projected onto her. And now? Now I see a warrior who fights with intelligence instead of claws, and that makes her more dangerous than half my army. The neutral arena sat in a valley between territories, a stone circle that had witnessed challenges and truces for 3 generations. Sarah and Finn reached it 2 days before the scheduled combat, moving through the forest like shadows. From their vantage point on the ridge above, they could see everything. The arena itself, the camps being erected for the witnesses, the supply wagons bringing food and medical equipment for the aftermath, and there, on the eastern approach, a small group of warriors setting up positions that had nothing to do with observation. Sarah pulled out the distance lens Thorne had given her. Through it, she could see Riker directing the placement of clay vessels, the same wolfsbane grenades that had crippled Thorne's rescue force. But these were different, larger, more sophisticated, and positioned not around the arena, but beneath it. He is going to collapse the floor, she breathed. Bury both alphas and anyone close enough to witness. Finn saw it too. That is not sabotage. That is assassination on a scale that will start a 3-way war. Which is exactly what he wants. Chaos. With Thorne, Blackthorn, and Garrick all eliminated, there is a power vacuum. He steps in with his mercenary force and claims territory by right of strength. We need to get this information back to Thorne. No, we need to stop this here. Sarah lowered the lens and began calculating approach angles. If we leave now, we give Riker time to add more safeguards, time to move positions. We end this now. 2 of us against 6 of them? 2 of us who they are not expecting against 6 of them who think they are safe. She looked at Finn. Can you get me close to those devices? What are you planning? Something different than last time. She remembered the summit grenades she had sabotaged by swapping contents. These have triggering mechanisms, master detonators. If I can disable the triggers, the grenades become inert. No explosion, no gas, just clay pots sitting in the dirt. Finn stared at her. You know how to disable wolfsbane triggers? I know how to disable any trigger. You cut the connection between activation and payload. Her wolf stirred, lending confidence. I watched the weapons master at the summit, saw how they are assembled. It is not complicated, just precise. And if you are wrong, then we both die in an explosion and Thorne fights without sabotage. She met his eyes. But I am not wrong. They waited until the deepest part of night when Riker's warriors had settled into rotating watches. 2 guards at a time, 4-hour shifts. Predictable, exploitable. Sarah moved first. Her wolf lent her speed and silence, turning her into a shadow among shadows. She slipped between tents and supply wagons, heading for the arena floor. Finn created the distraction. A noise at the far edge of camp, nothing major. Just enough to pull 1 guard away to investigate. Sarah used those precious minutes to reach the first grenade emplacement. The clay vessel was larger than the ones she had seen before, with a more sophisticated triggering mechanism. a master control connected to 6 individual detonators, each wired to a separate device. Riker could trigger them all simultaneously or one at a time. Sarah studied it in the darkness, her wolf lending her enhanced vision. The mechanism was elegant. A pressure trigger connected to a chemical release. Break the seal, release the gas. But every mechanism had a weakness. And this one's weakness was the wire connecting trigger to payload. She worked with steady hands, using a small blade to carefully expose the wire without disturbing the pressure plate. Then, with infinite care, she cut the connection. The trigger remained intact. The payload remained sealed. But the two were no longer connected. To anyone checking the mechanism, it would appear functional. Only when Riker activated it would he discover the sabotage. 10 minutes per device. 6 devices total. An hour of work in enemy territory with discovery meaning certain death. Sarah had never felt more alive. Her wolf moved with her, a steady presence of confidence and purpose. This was what they had been waiting for. This was why they had been patient all those years. The 5th device was positioned directly under the arena's center stone, the place where Thorn and Blackthorn would meet. Sarah was halfway through disabling the trigger when she heard boots approaching. She froze, pressing herself into the shadow beneath the arena floor. A guard walked past, close enough that she could have reached out and touched his boot. He paused, looked around. His hand drifted toward his weapon. Through the bond, she felt Thorn wake in distant Black Ridge, felt his instant alertness to her fear. She forced calm through the connection, a message of, "I am fine, still working, do not worry." Her wolf settled, lending strength, patient, strategic, waiting for the right moment. The guard moved on. Sarah finished the 5th device and moved to the 6th. This one was the master trigger, the control mechanism designed to detonate all the others simultaneously. She studied it, her mind racing through possibilities. If she disabled it completely, Riker would know someone had found his setup. He would change plans, move the weapons, adjust his tactics. They would lose the advantage of knowing his strategy. But if she left it apparently active while cutting the connections, Riker would trigger nothing but his own exposure. Sarah made the decision in heartbeats. She disabled all 6 connections, but left the master trigger intact and visible. Riker would think his trap was still set, but when he sprung it, nothing would happen except revealing his treachery to everyone watching. She and Finn extracted before dawn, moving through the forest like ghosts. Behind them, Riker's camp stirred to wakefulness, none of them aware that their carefully laid trap had been turned into evidence of conspiracy. When they reached Thorn, Sarah reported everything: the placement, the triggering mechanism, the sabotage. He listened with the focus of a commander processing battlefield intelligence. "So when Riker triggers the devices, nothing happens," he said when she finished. "That gives us what? Proof of his treachery?" "More. He will be positioned near the trigger. When it fails, he will move to check the devices. That is when we take him, in front of everyone, with evidence of attempted regicide." Sarah spread a map of the arena on the table. "We use his own trap to expose him." Magnus nodded slowly. "It could work, if Blackthorn is smart enough to recognize what is happening." "He is honorable," Thorn said. "When he realizes someone tried to kill us both, he will respond. The question is whether we can coordinate without communication." "You will have communication," Sarah pointed to herself. "I will be in the witness stands. When the trigger fails, I signal. You and Blackthorn both know I am your asset. When I signal, he will understand." It was audacious, dangerous, and the best tactical option they had. Thorn looked at the woman who had walked into his kingdom as a sacrifice and become his greatest strategic advantage. "After this is over, we are having a serious discussion about you risking your life quite so often. After this is over, we will have won. That is worth any risk." She met his eyes. "Trust me." Through the bond, he felt her absolute certainty, her unwavering belief that they could pull this off. "I do," he said, and meant it with everything he had. The arena filled at dawn on the 30th day. 3 packs sent witnesses: Blackridge, Southern Reach, even Silverwood, represented by Garrick himself, came to watch the outcome that would reshape their territories. Thorn arrived with Magnus and 20 warriors. He wore simple leather armor, carried a single long blade, and moved with the careful deliberation of a man managing injuries. Let them see the weakness. Let them think he was barely functional. Magnus Blackthorn entered from the opposite gate. He was everything the stories promised: Tall, broad, moving with the fluid grace of a warrior in his prime. His armor was polished, his weapons sharp, and his confidence absolute. They met in the center of the arena. The master of ceremonies read the terms: single combat to submission or death. Winner claimed both territories. Losers' people would be integrated with mercy and honor. Sarah watched from the witness stands, positioned where both combatants could see her clearly. She wore the colors of Black Ridge and sat with perfect stillness. To anyone watching, she was just another observer. But her eyes never stopped moving, tracking Riker's position, monitoring the guards he had placed strategically around the arena. Her wolf was alert, coiled like a spring, ready, waiting for the moment when theater became war. The combat began with Blackthorn's expected aggression. He came in hard and fast, testing Thorn's defenses with powerful strikes that would have overwhelmed a lesser opponent. Thorn gave ground, moving in the defensive patterns Sarah had drilled into him. Let him chase. Make him work. Conserve energy while he burns it. The crowd watched with growing tension as the Southern Alpha drove the Mountain King back. Some of Thorn's warriors shifted uneasily. This looked like the prelude to defeat. But Magnus, standing beside Sarah, smiled grimly. He is playing him. Watch the footwork. Sarah saw it. Thorn was not retreating in panic. He was controlling the engagement, drawing Blackthorn into overextension, testing responses, gathering information. 10 minutes into the fight, Thorn had mapped his opponent's patterns, knew when he favored the right side, knew when he overcommitted to high strikes, knew the rhythm of his breathing and the tells before each assault. And then Thorn shifted from defense to counteroffense. It was not dramatic. No sudden transformation, just a subtle change in tempo that caught Blackthorn off guard. A deflection that turned into a strike, a retreat that became an advance, the kind of tactical flexibility that came from fighting smart instead of hard. Blackthorn adjusted, recognizing the shift. The fight settled into a deadly dance of skill against skill, experience against experience, both men bleeding from minor cuts, both breathing hard, neither giving quarter. They were 20 minutes into the combat when Sarah saw Riker move. He was at the eastern edge of the arena, hand moving to the device at his belt, the trigger for the grenades beneath the arena floor. His eyes were on the fighters, waiting for the perfect moment when both were committed and vulnerable. Sarah tensed, her wolf coiled tighter, ready to spring. Riker triggered the devices. Nothing happened. The arena floor remained solid. No explosion, no gas, no collapse. Just the continued sounds of combat and the sudden confusion on Riker's face. He triggered again. Nothing. Sarah stood, raised her arm in the prearranged signal. A single gesture that meant threat from the east, sabotage exposed. Thorn saw it. So did Blackthorn. And in that moment of failed assassination, two enemies became temporary allies. They turned as one toward Riker, who was already trying to retreat. His mercenaries rushed forward, attempting to cover his escape. They found instead two Alpha warriors who moved with coordinated precision. Thorn took the left flank. Blackthorn took the right. They cut through the attackers with brutal efficiency, working together like they had trained for years instead of minutes. Sarah did not stay in the stands. Her wolf surged forward, lending speed and strength. She moved with the other Black Ridge warriors toward the eastern position, Finn at her side. They cornered Riker against the arena wall as the chaos spread. He had a blade in each hand and desperation in his eyes. "You should be dead," he snarled at Sarah. "All of you should be dead." "You made the same mistake Garrick made," Sarah said calmly, her wolf steady and confident in her chest. "You underestimated the quiet ones, the ones you do not think are watching." Riker lunged. Sarah sidestepped with wolf-enhanced speed, and Finn's blade took him through the shoulder. The traitor went down hard, his weapons clattering to the stone. In the arena, Thorn and Blackthorn stood back to back, surrounded by the bodies of the mercenaries foolish enough to attack two Alpha Kings. The crowd had gone silent, watching the impossible alliance formed in combat. Blackthorn spoke first. "Someone just tried to kill us both." "Yes." Thorn did not lower his weapon. "The question is whether we continue our fight or address the common threat." The challenge was honorable. "This," Blackthorn gestured to the carnage, "is not. I withdraw my challenge. Whoever orchestrated this insult answers to both our packs." He offered his hand. Thorn took it. The alliance was sealed in blood and combat, and the understanding that some enemies transcended territorial disputes. Garrick, watching from the Silverwood section, recognized his exposure. He had been seen speaking with Riker before the combat, had been implicated in the conspiracy through association. He tried to retreat, but Magnus and the Black Ridge warriors blocked every exit. "Garrick of Silverwood," Thorne's voice carried across the arena. "You stand accused of conspiracy to commit regicide, of plotting to assassinate 2 Alpha Kings, of using prohibited weapons against honorable combat. How do you answer?" Garrick looked at the warriors surrounding him, looked at Thorne and Blackthorn standing together, looked at Sarah, alive and defiant, her wolf visible in the set of her shoulders and the confidence in her stance. He knew he had lost. "I invoke the right of trial by combat," he said. A desperate play, a last gamble. "Denied." Blackthorn's voice was granite. "You forfeited honor when you employed an assassin. You will be tried by Council of Alphas. If found guilty, you will be executed as a traitor to all pack kind." The trial was conducted that same afternoon in the arena, with representatives from all 3 packs serving as jury. The evidence was overwhelming. Riker confessed, hoping for mercy that never came. The disabled grenades were displayed, examined, confirmed as assassination tools. Testimony from refugees detailed years of Garrick's abuses. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The execution was carried out at sunset, swift and final. Garrick died with the same lack of ceremony he had shown his victims. Riker followed moments later. Justice, not revenge. The end of men who had valued power over honor. As the sun touched the western peaks, Thorne stood with Blackthorn in the center of the arena where they had nearly died together. "Your territory needs leadership," Blackthorn said. "Silverwood is broken. The southern clans are fractured. Someone has to hold the region together or we descend into chaos." "I am not interested in conquest," Thorne replied. "I want peace, stability, a future where packs work together instead of tearing each other apart." "Then we build that future, together." Blackthorn extended his hand again. "A formal alliance, 3 territories, 3 alphas, 1 governing council. We share resources, coordinate defense, build something that lasts beyond our lifetimes." Thorne looked at the offered hand, thought about 10 years of war, thought about the cost in lives and blood, thought about Sarah's words about rebuilding into something worth defending. He took the hand. "Alliance. But we do it right. Representatives from all packs. Decisions made by council, not decree. Laws that protect the vulnerable, not just the strong." "Agreed. Though I imagine your mate will have strong opinions about those laws." Thorne smiled. "She has strong opinions about everything, and I have learned to listen." The alliance was formalized that night, signed by all 3 alphas in the arena where blood had been shed and enemies had become allies. 3 territories became 1 federation. Silverwood was absorbed and reformed under new leadership chosen by council vote. The southern clans brought their technology and resources. Black Ridge brought military strength and strategic position. And at the center of it all, standing beside Thorne as the documents were signed, was Sarah. Not hiding in shadows, not invisible. Present, acknowledged. Her wolf confident in her chest, patient strategy finally rewarded. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the Joint Council and presented her proposal for establishing educational standards across all 3 territories. The chamber was filled with alphas and representatives from dozens of packs. All of them had come to hear the woman who had become known as the Silent Queen, not for her lack of words, but for the years she had spent in silence, watching and learning and planning. The name had started as mockery, but had transformed into respect. She spoke for 20 minutes, outlining a system that would educate all pack members, regardless of rank or status. That would teach tactics and strategy alongside hunting and shifting. That would value intelligence as much as strength. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then Magnus stood. The old warrior who had once been suspicious of the Omega tribute now smiled with something like pride. "The council recognizes the wisdom of this proposal. All in favor?" The vote was unanimous. Thorne watched from his place at the high table and felt satisfaction settle in his chest. She had done this herself, had built credibility through competence, had transformed from invisible servant to respected advisor through sheer force of capability. After the session, she found him in the corridor outside the chamber. "That went well," she said. "You were exceptional, as always." He took her hand. "Walk with me?" They moved through the halls of what had once been just his keep and was now the seat of the Federation. Workers were still repairing damage from the war years. still building new structures to accommodate the expanded government. They reached the overlook that faced toward what had been Silverwood territory. The forests were healing. Patrols from all 3 territories worked together to maintain security. Trade routes that had been closed for a decade were open again. "We did that," Sarah said quietly, her wolf a steady presence of contentment. "We took broken pieces and built something whole." "You did that. I was just the blunt instrument you pointed at problems." She laughed. "You are many things, my king, but blunt is not one of them." He pulled her close. Through the bond, they shared the memory of that first meeting. The tribute in chains, the king prepared to kill, the moment of recognition that had changed both their lives. "Would you do it again?" she asked, "knowing everything it would cost?" "Every time, 1,000 times." He met her eyes. Because that tribute was not a sacrifice. She was a revolution disguised as weakness. Sarah smiled and leaned into him, her wolf at peace for the first time in years. "Good, because I would volunteer again. Every time, 1,000 times." They stood together and watched the sun set over the territories they had bled for, united, healed, building something that would outlast them both. Not because of destiny or magic or the bond that pulsed between them, but because they had chosen it, had fought for it, had been willing to pay the price in blood and sacrifice and endless hard work. And in the end, that choice, that willingness to fight for something better, was worth more than any power or territory or crown. It was worth everything. The end.